Hey, well, welcome to the Mastermind Book Club. This week we have gone into an autobiography that has impacted me psychologically in a way that I wasn't expecting, but this book really impacted me. And I wanted to introduce one of our members, Martha, here, who is ready to tell us the name of the book and the author. Martha?
Yeah, the name of the book tonight is the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass. It was an American slave.
And the author?
The author Frederick Douglass.
Yes, right. That's right. Thank you. Thank you. So let's get this book on the way. We're going to give a brief summary of what we thought were most important details. There are many details in here that are very, very important. We could go on for an hour or two minimum discussing what's going on in this book, but we want to give you the important details that we feel are important for us to get ahead with our foundations of going from where this book took us to going ahead of it. Reggie, would you like to fill us in on what did you learn or your summary on this amazing autobiography?
Yes, yes, I can add something right off the top. I think about the slave situation, or I think about Harriet Tubman, where she said that she could, at one point, she said she could free more slaves. She was running the Underground Railroad. She said, I could have freed more slaves if more of those slaves actually knew they were slaves. So that was like very powerful, the fact that she said, so a lot of people are in this enslaved mentality and don't even realize it because of whatever, just things that they get misled into thinking that things are kind of okay. And we know clearly slavery was not okay, but for some reason that was a situation whereby whatever little things were being put into their head to make them believe that somewhat this thing was somewhat okay. They actually, slaves at that time actually they were actually kind of like, okay, well, what's really the big problem here? We get food, we get clothes, we get this, we get that. And it was like, what is the problem? Yeah, you're being destroyed. You're being taken advantage of. You're being torn asunder. This is not a good thing. But then I think about, Frederick Douglass and a statement he made about, and how dare we could even call a master, any master who was a slave master, a decent master, or as he said, like his best master was this guy by the name of last name Richfield. And he mentioned that this guy was like his best master until he actually mastered himself. So I tie that to say, like, into the fact of, a slave not realizing they're a slave, but they were a slave. And so if they could have come out of that state of being, of realizing where they were, they could have been freed. And here's a person as having a master, Frederick Douglass, who realized or who might have stated a particular master as he's gone through several masters, maybe one being better than the other. But he realized ultimately when he became the master of himself, he was no longer a slave and he was actually the master. So that's really powerful. Coming out of a slave state and understanding you're not a slave and coming into a state of understanding that no one's your master because you're your master when you get to a point of realization of who you are and what you're capable of. And this was a journey that he went through that led him to a point where he actually realized, I'm powerful, I'm special, I'm somebody, I'm great, I belong here, I'm needed, I'm wanted, I'm desired, I have a purpose in this life. And this is what my thing is for me, is that I'm going to make sure that I live this life in a way where I ultimately end up doing something that leaves a mark and leaves a legacy, and I help to free others. So I thought that, just sort of shaping that statement, hopefully someone can get a little something from that.
All right. Thank you, Reg.
That's true.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
I what Reggie said is very true, and that it's a reality. Frederick Douglass went through a lot, and until he realized what was waiting on the other side, that's when he figured out what was going on. Martha, would you like to fill us in
Yeah,
on your summary?
yeah, I would like to say something. Frederick Douglass, he was the most recognized and celebrated faces in the abolition, the movement of the slavery in United States. He born as a slave and he escaped bondage to become an international um, author, author to dedicate his life to against the evil of the evil of the slavery. He was a man who was determined to be a better the slave owners and to be better as a human being. And that people he didn't care. He was in shame about the about his coming from people related from Africa. He was in shame for that, and he was very dedicated to people of color to defend, and he wants justice and freedom for the people of color. That's why he tried to work hard and tell his people he don't have to be a slave his whole life. He can have a better life like the white people, like the master he was talking about the people they own the slaves. He wants freedom and justice. And he now after 120 years that he passed away, we have a beautiful story and photograph. He was an extraordinary man. He was dedicated. He have a relationship with art, with politics, and photograph. He no wanted determination to avoid the slavery. He was smart too. He dedicated his life to art, and he was a beautiful photograph. It's an album in the museum about all his photos. It was amazing. He was very smart and very dedicated, and he loyalty. He have a family, he have children too, and he was for me it was a touch and extraordinary story. For me, it was beautiful.
Very
Very
good.
beautiful story.
Thank you, Martha, and a very touching story. And the parts about the photograph, very few people probably know that compared to uh, the average person doesn't know much about Frederick Douglass. Uh, Gina, I know you came in late, but I wanted to see maybe you have a minute or so summary in reference to this book. If you do, great. If you don't, well, we can continue either way. Gina, it's yours if you want to talk.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, David. I hope you guys can hear me clearly.
Loud and
I'm
clear.
over in the islands and I'm sorry for coming on so late. Had to
No,
chase
it's
the
fine.
family out.
Hey,
Anyway, good to see you guys. Reading, I got through the book entirely and it was very painful for me, as I suppose it was for, I didn't hear what you guys, the rest of you had said earlier, but yeah, it was a very painful read. I have read this book before and I did not, recall some of the hardships and stuff that he had mentioned in there. And I wonder if because I had blocked it mentally somehow, it was just so hard to, comprehend how, man can be so inhumane to man. And I like that Martha was talking about the good parts about it, and how she enjoyed the story and how everything else turned out. But I listened to it for a while and I was thinking, why in the world did David choose this book? That was my thought. But my gosh, it was just I don't know, hard for me. As I said, I put it down and then I would pick it up again and then I put it down. It's like, oh my God, it's just like, oh, but yeah, thank you for choosing it, David. And sometimes it's, I suppose it's good to go back and, revisit history and how, we've gotten where we are today and the advancements and so forth that, we have made and, how much further we still need to go so that we can all feel that we're equal here, on this earth, like equally treated here on earth. So yeah, that's pretty much what I would like to say. Thank
thank
you.
you, Gina. Thank you. Appreciate that. Um, the reality is I chose that book because I thought we needed a tangent just to take a little bit off the path. We have a lot of powerful books to go over, but this one is very powerful and it is painful. I'm not going to kid you, but I just wanted to share two things. Number one is my family is a mixed family. In my mother's side of the family, it's weird. Her parents are very dark skinned, very dark. My mother is pale. Half of my mother's brothers are dark skinned, and one of my mother's sisters is dark skinned, and then everybody else is pale. Weird, right? I married a very dark woman, and the race plays into the fact that no matter where you are, there is some kind of slavery that is in existence, some kind of slavery. Meaning, for example, in Dominican Republic, I didn't know this when I was very young, but I went into wealthy families' homes where they had a girl bringing up a girl, and she would do all the chores. And the promise was to the family is we're going to keep this girl. And by the time she's older, we're going to make sure she goes to school and that she's able to get a successful job.
She's a domestic worker.
I don't know if that makes sense to you, but the reality is that this book goes hand in hand with what's happening in the world today. We're all, unless we are out of debt, free from debt, being able to travel everywhere we are held to some kind of, of slaveism, in the sense of we're not free, completely free. And that's just the reality, is that unless you realize that debt is a new type of slavery, it's the way that slaveism has transformed throughout the world, you're not free. And the reality is not far from that. Now, in reference to Frederick Douglass, he was an amazing man. He found a woman who was ready to educate him, and he changed his name, his last name, from Bailey to Johnson when he got to New York and married. And then from the person that he got Johnson from, picked his name and put it to Frederick Douglass. It was Frederick. He never changed his first name, but that's just the reality. The biggest thing that I'd like you to take away from this is that there was so much pain in the 1800s, 1700s, most probably, that, as Reggie said, no one was really aware of it. I believe it was Reggie who said that. No one was really aware of the pain that was out there. But it's the same thing with us. Sometimes we don't know that we're poor. Sometimes we don't know that we're broke. Until what? Until you start to research, until you start to search, until you start to get sick and tired of your situation. And that's what led him to move on, is he got sick and tired of his situation eventually. It took him a very long time to figure it out. What was his situation? First of all, as he was growing up, lack of education. He wasn't forced to be educated. Nobody was forced to be educated. Now, if you notice that in the school system, that's another broken system, right? You're not taught about money. You're not taught about building a business. You're taught about adding, subtracting, and being an employee in a company is where it all winds up. Whoopee-doo. No, but that's not the way. So we are trapped. We are slaves to the system unless we choose to look for more. So that's it. I mean, that could go on and on and on in reference to Frederick Douglass. And I wanted to give Charles a minute or so. I don't know if Ty wants to speak to, but I'd like to keep it very brief because we're already out of time. Charles, if you and Tawana want to give a minute each, it would be great. And let's do this. Charles?
Hey, good evening, everybody. Pardon my tardiness. The book was incredible. I had read about Frederick Douglass many, many times before, in school and out of school. He's one of my heroes as far as just standing up to a difficult situation in which he had no control. As you was talking about, he stood up to, was it Convey, the slave buster, and from that point he got strength to keep standing up, even though everything that was against him, to keep putting him down. He went on to figure out how to get his freedom, which was amazing. But he didn't stop there. He could have stopped and got, after he, got his own freedom and did his own thing. But no, he went and he reached back to others, and he joined the Ledger newspaper, and he wrote articles about the atrocities that were going on during that time. He's a great American hero. He should be counted as one of the founding fathers, because he not only stood up for his people, he stood up for the country. He stood up for the laws, the 13th, the 14th, and the 15th Amendment, said that we all have rights, even women. And he stood for that. That he was one of the precursors to women's rights, which no one really talked about, in addition to African Americans' rights and the rights of others. So Frederick Douglass, like I said, he was a great American hero, basically one of the founding fathers who they went to fight, they say, over slavery, but really the separation of the Union was about economics. But that's a story for another time. But once again, Frederick Douglass was a great American.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you for adding that. And Charles, Ty, would you like to take a minute to summarize, or are you busy?
Hey, hi everyone. Hi,
Ty,
David.
hey.
Hi. Actually, like Charles said, I heard a lot about Frederick Douglass, and I knew about, that he started a newspaper, he bought himself out of slavery, but I never ever heard the story actually coming from his own words. So as a person of color, I mean, it's like as I listen to the lady reading his letters, it's like I was there with him. I was there. I was there. And it was like, oh my goodness. So it just became so real to me. And that's why, like, I don't mean to get passionate about it or emotional, how some people will brush it off like, oh, it's only Black people, or it's only just a nigga, excuse my expression. However, we are people. And the thing that I've realized is the misconception and the miseducation of our children and people, where we have to bring it back and teach each other, and also learn that it's a state of mind. We have to learn to change our state of mind and know that we come back to that little train that could. I know I can. Yes, I am. And I'm gonna leave it like that to not go on and on. Thank
Wow.
you.
That's very powerful. Each and every one said something very powerful. Thank you, Ty, for sharing that. And the reality is we could go on and on and on with this summary in reference to Frederick Douglass' autobiography. But 1838, September 3rd, that's really when things switched for him. Very important date, September 3rd, 1838. Right? Don't forget it. So this is it for the Mastermind Book Club summary of Frederick Douglass' autobiography. Until next week, when we're going to review a book on self-improvement. Take care.